one moment here as we get a few things set up. All right, I think we have everything set up. Quick sound test in the chat. Can anyone hear me? Hey. I'm probably going to pronounce the username wrong, but Sephariah. Are you able to hear our audio? Awesome. Looks like we had a few docked items not showing up. So we'll have to swap between tabs just to make sure that I can see everyone's chat. No worries. So it has been a little bit since we did a live stream. The studio has been really busy. Everyone is deep into work every week and progressing towards, one of our new goals, which is the first test of the new Fractured Online. And that first test is around combat. So it's touching a lot of different systems, and it's something that we'll talk about today. So just checking to give everyone a few moments from the event, notifying everyone in Discord, but yeah, we can go ahead and start hopping in. So today, really wanted to go over kind of a lot of different things, a lot of different topics, a lot to collect feedback and information to let everyone know what we have been working on, what we're working on now, and kind of where we're focused. And with that, some of this is going to be a little bit of recap, as we've told in a few different videos that we are updating armors and graphics and changing a lot of that. So some of those have been teased out in previous videos, but yeah, largely we can go ahead and hop in. So thanks everyone for joining. It's always great. We hope to do more of these live stream kind of developer updates, as a lot of what we're going to talk about today has been put on the roadmap, not just because of our own vision and the change in kind of the direction of Fractured Online, but a lot of it is from the community over the years and what they've asked for, what everyone here has been wanting. One of the key things is, I remember a long time ago, it's the WASD movement. There's a lot of things that need to change to support that really well, and it's taking a little bit longer to manifest, but we'll go over some of those. So I wanted to start with like a high-level project recap. If you haven't seen the videos or developer updates and you're just joining in on the live stream, welcome. But today is actually a pretty important day for Fractured Online. And what I mean by that is we are shutting down the current version of Fractured Online. It was supposed to be yesterday, but there was a few things that was easy to grab from live, so we kept it up just a little bit longer. But today, a little bit after this stream, we will be shutting down the current version of Fractured Online. And the goal of that is to conserve resources, focus our development time, as we've been maybe 4 or 5 months into development on the new relaunch of Fractured Online. So we will be relaunching. We're still working with Steam on the details, but most likely will be a new Steam page. Everyone will get, just like we've covered in the FAQ, everyone that has purchased, everything will follow over. And we will begin to do testing in Q3, and we'll continue just constant testing and playing with the developers and onboarding more and more people into that test. And we'll be testing critical systems, following up to the relaunch of Q1 in 2026. So pretty quick turnaround for a relaunch of a game, and quite a few things are changing. So just as a reminder, toss your questions in the chat. It's meant to be interactive, and I know more people are showing up. And this isn't our normal super late time. We're trying to bring the streams and videos a little earlier in the day. So just to recap the recap, FO is shutting down today as we rebuild and relaunch. And we really want everyone here to be joining in the play with the developers, testing these systems, and providing feedback. Like I said a moment ago, a lot of these changes are from the community asking for these things. And so we really want you to provide that feedback in it. You know, if a particular system is not feeling good, we want to get that early on before we hit the relaunch. Kind of moving on a bit. So sad news, but for the better. Kind of covering this in detail, the high level. So there's a ton of milestones underneath. We have a ton of different deliverables. And I started to put these all on slides, and it ended up just becoming like a word mess for everyone. So I was going to detail these milestones out in a blog post coming soon. We have all of those. It's just making sure it's the best way to present it. But the critical pieces in the left side of this project plan is the first test is really going to focus on two major things. And this is in Q3 of 2025. And that is the new combat system. It is affecting, the classes, what we're calling archetypes, is a choice of, class and multi-class type setup. That is impacting combat quite drastically. The moves are different, the animations are, we're seeing what we can reuse, what new animations have to happen. But that combat is foundational to the PvE and PvP experience. The goal of the first combat test is that it is PvP. We want to make sure that, Fracture Online has always been a PvP first game, while both PvE and PvP going forward is balancing out, providing more structured PvP options and a lot more PvE content. We do want to make sure that PvP feels good, as well as in a little bit later of a test in Q3 2025, that PvE also feels good. I feel like if PvP can feel good, then PvE we can make feel good with far less effort. And a lot of those things depend, for example, the PvE depends on the new kind of AI systems for the NPCs, so that we can have more intelligent and behavioral type systems for NPCs. But so kind of stepping back, PvP, combat, in the new biome is the first test in Q3. So we are all now marching towards that in the development. So development changes are become a little bit more sparse to show updates on. But we're pretty excited, as this is the new infrastructure after the acquisition, standing up on new game servers that we're hoping perform a lot better with a new networking layer. So the complete backend has been rewritten. So quite a few changes, and Fracture Online will feel different from the first test, and going forward we'll only continue to build upon that. Yeah, main quest, absolutely. So even internally, some of the last pieces for us to all get in as a development team continuously is falling into place, so that we can actually begin early, testing internally. Right now, everyone is kind of siloed in their testing. So we're looking forward to that, as it's been quite a number of months with the networking side of it being replaced, that we haven't been able to actually play together in a multiplayer game. But moving from that first kind of Q3 testing scenario, and there's quite a few more tests that will happen in between there. They're smaller, and it would be a big list to show, but a lot of supporting systems. For example, the current plan in this first test for combat is that you'll have kind of pre-selected classes with their specialization chosen, and that's not meant to be permanent. That is just for the test, so you have a few options. We'll go over some of those details towards the end of the live stream today. Q4 will be moving into what we'll kind of call the larger system milestones, the building, the territory type control, the guilds, the faction systems, a lot of those where you belong and how you show identity in the world, building, etc. That's also between the first test to the Q4 that more of those biomes will come online, and we'll talk a little bit more about those a little farther. But a large part of the community kept asking for, and myself included, but more rich identity in the world, and often the look back towards the older alpha when there was a particular area that many players enjoyed because it had a stronger identity. And so we're actually applying that same principle, the same high quality focused content across all of the continent. So going back down to one continent as the foundation for moving about in the fractured universe. And that's going to have 5 biomes. So the first one being the steppes biome, and we'll talk more about those in detail in a minute. And then in between Q4 to Q1, there'll be more progression system tests at that point. So tying everything together, moving away from some of the existing systems. We've talked about some of that. But as we get a little closer, we continue to share more of those designs and really kind of focused on relaunch at that point. Like I said, ton of little building blocks throughout all of that. Do we want to make the maps larger? Main quest to ask. Well, the main continent is already very large, especially for a team our size. Honestly, even for teams quadruple our size, they rarely will tackle, I think it's like 64 square kilometers worth of open world, and that only be a part of the game. If you remember, or you go play right now before we shut off Fractured Online, there's actually 2 very large worlds. But we really wanted to focus back on one. It is going to change. It won't look the same, not only from a visual perspective, but from an elevation, from the layout of the world is going to be different. And we're really focusing on quality on this. So we have the systems and tools to spawn and create many, as pretty much as large of the world as we want. But if it's not full of content, if it's empty, then it won't feel good. So a long way to answer your question, main quest, is no, we don't think that we'll be doing maps bigger than this. But we do have plans, in the fractured universe, the planet was fractured. Well, what happened to all these fractures, right? So it gives us an opportunity to explore moving between maybe very distinct identity of some of these shards, giving a little bit away of Matt, our world designer, his lore that he's been pulling together with Andre. But we think that there's more of an opportunity to have more exploration on smaller maps than it is on massive maps. So you can think of Aaron in the new Fractured Online, it's almost that foundation for everyone to go out and explore. Will there be slightly more advanced housing, or will the system keep to the same basics as old Fractured? Actually, I'm going to be covering that in a couple slides here. So yes, it will be more advanced. That was another ask from the community on making, they wanted to make their home and decorate their home, have an identity and a place inside the fractured universe. And so we really want to foster that. And that's the reason why it's also one of the critical pieces on this particular project plan, is that the system supports it, but getting the UI right and making that building feel good. And to be honest, there's players, sometimes myself, in some of these games that will make monstrosities in their building. And we want to make sure that there's rules and guards, but also as much creativity as possible. Future Fractured Online, most oriented to Albion or another MMORPG. I think with any game design, you take inspiration from other games, right? I think Albion had long been considered like one of the closest comparisons in the past. But to be honest, we're trying to take inspiration from many things, create some new paths forward, combine a few different elements as all game development has, and see if we can't trudge our own way through. So faction warfare has been done in many games, not just Albion, but also guild wars. The actual word guild wars, not the game guild wars, but where guild battles happen and you vie over different things to take it from guilds. So to answer your question more directly, Albion has a lot of things from a lot of different games too. So we're just pulling together things and making it our own unique flavors. Hopefully that answered your question. We here in Brazil love the game. Sorry for questions. Is that I will post an article about game law on my games portal. So we definitely appreciate any publicity that anyone does organically sharing. So, games are part marketing budget, part development budget, and then part miracle and hope of success, right? And Fractured Online has an interesting community in a very positive way that a lot of the people that drive organic communication around our game is because they care about it and they had a lot of fun in the past, or they have a lot of thoughts on what it could be. So we definitely appreciate everyone, staying around and hopping in Discord and providing feedback and just asking questions about what could be, what won't be, and our thoughts behind it. So a couple more questions, we'll move on just a little bit. Do you intend to put a more attractive story in the game? So our first plans, well, in short, yes, but that's going to be a little bit of a longer effort. And what I mean by that is we want to start exposing the world lore. In fact, I didn't put the concept art pieces in today's, but I can pull them up in a minute. Mikhail is, the meme is going to start surfacing. He is drawing and he's really helping visually explain some of the lore that's been hidden in the past years and that hasn't been surfaced. So we really want the world lore to start surfacing through fragments and artifacts that you find in the world to reward exploration. A lot more NPCs and quests from that. But we do want to begin weaving mini stories throughout different areas, right? That tie into the different factions. But it won't ever be a heavy story-driven game. We do hope to begin testing with some voice actors later on this year. Well, Split Lane Adventure, thank you for your questions. I can't speak French or another language, so any other language is a one-up on me. So I appreciate you even using English to ask questions. So let's hop on here. Some of these are, like I said, going to be a little bit of a recap. So we're going to go through a few different things today. High-level update on the character system. Covered that quite a bit in a previous video, so we'll go over it slightly. Armors, some of the updates around player housing, and kind of talk through our new philosophy on player housing. And then, start on pets. Before we hop in, I really like the way the two worlds were geared towards PvE, PvP, but switching between them was complicated. Another point would be a daily, monthly reward system for guilds based on their activity. There's a lot of different ways. So you're right. There's many different ways, and there was a difficulty in traveling between. And in the previous kind of design and creative direction, there was a reason for that. And it may not sometimes have been easy to understand it. It kind of felt difficult. But going forward, we're looking at ways that we want to facilitate travel across the fractured universe, with RN being the first one. So that will change. And we are looking at daily, monthly reward systems and achievement, really kind of expanding out on what that knowledge system could be. So not just going and visiting points of interest, but also achieving certain things. We've all played a lot of MMOs that have had a lot of achievement-based aspects to it, and you get cosmetic rewards or decorations for your house or different things like that. We're always a big fan of those types of systems. So thanks for the question there. So like I said, some of this is recap. Many things are changing in Fractured Online, and not only that, not only the characters, but the armors and stuff. One second here. And so the male and female models are changing to provide more hairstyles, to provide more options on skin color, on hair color, on facial hair options, eye options, and just try to update the visual like fidelity and options for identity for characters that you make. And then a question of pets. My brain took me far away to a world where we could tame little dragons on the Fractured map. So that is a much longer answer, but taming, we currently believe that taming will be part of a class. In this particular pet, that we'll talk about in a minute, is part of the Kickstarter, and it's a cosmetic pet. So back to the characters on this, we will start to see more and more hairstyles. So we have a list that we're working towards launching with, but we've teased a few of these out. But the goal of this is just to provide more creativity for your character. We don't see where we will get to a point where you're editing every small piece of the player, as we are a top-down game, so you lose any of those details that you may have that in like third-person or first-person games. But we do want the pieces that you do modify and choose hairstyles, colors, options, all of that to show and that you can see. And some of these were in the past, so the male, female, just showing different options. Some of these armors are a little outdated, but the hair feature, facial features were changes, so face changes are in there now. And we're expanding that list as we go towards launch, relaunch, on how many faces, how many hairs, all of that. And these just a few more options. So kind of starting into the armor section, we had a variety of armors already in the game, but they, to be honest, were getting outdated. With the game being out for a while and graphics improving and changing, we really wanted to hone in on a new style that was a little bit more friendly to time, and that was a little realistic with a slight touch of like stylized. And so we started going through and we're right at the finish line of updating the existing armors. Some of them look drastically different. They could be almost completely new armors. And this will get us over the finish line so we can work on new armors. And we'll do a post later on about that. But quite a few more armors than what you'll see here today is on the roadmap. So kind of going back through, if you've played Fractured Online, you'll kind of recognize some of these. But basic clothes, and we could have done a before and after, and we'll probably do that in the blog post. But a lot of these are, your lower tier armors that you get as you're beginning your journey in Fractured Online. And colors are changeable. So there's 3 different color options for every armor and clothing. And you'll start to see some of these are a little bit more tied towards class. And as we talked about before, you'll be able to multi-class between things and then pick up those armor options. Yep, split lane adventure. You're absolutely right. Dragos, our 3D artist focused on weapons and armor, has been doing a fantastic job at increasing like the detail and fidelity of the armor. And a little bit later, I'll show a few of the recolors. But when we start testing and everyone can hop in and begin to choose different colors and different armors, you'll see a lot more variety in how you want to show and present your character. So This is always one of my favorite sets, even in the old Fractured, and then now after the polish and redo, to be honest, it's significantly better on the eyes. It looks fantastic. And then showing some of the newer ones. So like I said, these were beginning armors, right? So you want a sense of progression as you go through the game. And so you often want to start off with, you know, in the current Fractured Online, we call it like a primitive, but going forward, they're just different tiers of armors. And then as you get to a certain tier, it opens up more. And as you choose maybe a multi-class, it opens up a different set of specialized armors. But, you know, a hide armor being, you know, tier 2 is just that step in that progression. And you can kind of see from the ragged clothes all the way to the hide armor to the leather armor, you can see where you would be, you know, required to process materials differently to get to this armor. So things like Battle Mage would be an option for whenever you are combining Mage and like a fighter class together. And each of these sets will have different set attributes and, you know, balancing. Primitive hazmat suit. Well, I mean, if you are out in the wilderness and you're skinning animals for hides, that's pretty apocalyptic to me. So the key here that I think a lot of players may be missing whenever you look at this is one of the capabilities we didn't have in the past is that we couldn't really show skin through armor, right? The armor had to fully cover up someone. And now we have the option that you can actually see, you know, arms, or, you know, some armors will only have maybe one sleeve on it, or, you know, in this case, it shows like half of the chest. And that even opens up the possibility for things like tattoos later on your character. But it really allows your character not just to feel encased in a suit of armor all the time, no matter what material it is. But getting back up to the next year. Some of these, if you've played Fractured Online, you'll recognize. Some, you know, if not, then these all kind of look new. But this was a redo of the old Slayer set, focusing on rolling into a warrior set going forward. So you'll see a lot of these. Things like the chainmail armor has almost been completely redone from the old. But definitely has a very high focus on exposing the metal surfaces. And you're able to change color, the tinting on the metals, on the cloth for each of the different pieces. Yeah. Yep. Takes a little bit to get to the Slayer set. Going forward, there'll be an option to take a Slayer set all the way through your levels. I was really confused about that question for a moment there, main quest. We have DNA tests for feedbacks. I don't think that will have you submit your DNA. I don't think we want that. But an NDA, to be honest, no. I don't see a world in which we'll have an NDA. A lot of you have already bought the game. You have been playing, and it kind of seems odd to have an NDA. We're pretty open in our development. We are a small team of roughly, depending on where we are in the project and who's kind of you know, contracting, etc., around 8, 9, 10 people, and we just want to be open with the community as we go through this. We are looking at so how many tiers are planned for each set. So armor is going to be working a little bit differently, as well as resources. And while we haven't had that design talk yet to go into those details, the armor will have certain tiers that it belongs to, and you can think of it, you know, tier 1 is like 1 through 10 level. However level manifest, we're still, you know, figuring that out, but in the current Fractured Online, you have ranks and schools, and you have different ways of having levels. But you could think of, you know, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 has progressively better armor, and then once you get to tier 4, you'll have a set that you can always just change the material out, so the tier of materials, and have a T5 of the same look, a T6, and the stats will change appropriately based off of the materials that you put in. So you can have T7 all the way up to like T8. So some sets will progress from T4 on, some sets will stay in the lower tiers. But if that is something that everyone wants to run around and high tier ragged clothes, then that's maybe something that we consider. And this is the last armor set to be upgraded from the existing Fractured Online, and that is the plate mail armor. And that is currently what is on Dragos's plate as he works through reimagining the plate armor. If I didn't show a side-by-side, but there's quite a graphics difference in the existing plate kind of armor set that's in Fractured Online and this. And then that puts us at a milestone for armor that we're quite happy with. That in the short amount of time we've brought the armor sets up to visual fidelity that we're happy with. There will always be small things to polish, like the Battle Mage set has a couple potions on it, and we may change or put knives or daggers or certain different accessories as we have time and availability to really continue polishing some of these sets. But this is a fraction of the armors we have planned and the variety of armors that we have planned. Some armors going forward will have 4 varieties. For example, and we'll do a blog post on the future of armors, but to give a little bit of a teaser for it, when we look at like Priest, for example, and you have your certain devotion to a certain god, that would unlock the option to have specialized armor for that god. And while it may be robes, we're still working through the concepts of that. Let's say it's a robes and you have devotion to a certain god and it's a cloth robe. There's different ways that you can adorn that robe to show your devotion to that to your god. Let's see a few more questions. Do you have planned to add more life skills like fishing, cooking, etc. with stats? So absolutely. This is something we've talked about previously. Well, one, is it really a game if it doesn't have fishing? So I think the community over decades has decided that it's not a game if it doesn't have fishing, right? So yes, fishing, yes, cooking, but we want to make sure that fishing and cooking all have their own systems or game loops that are enjoyable, right? So we could toss in fishing, you catch a fish, and then you can process it just like you can in Fractured Online. It doesn't feel as impactful as it could be. One, food in the current Fractured Online is not where we want it to be either, right? Food was to fill up your player's hunger. Going forward, we want food to play a positive role. So we're getting rid of the like hunger and thirst from the survival aspect of it. And we're really moving towards, if you are spending the time either purchasing or gathering, whether it's fishing and crafting food recipes with fish in it, or you're doing a garden, perhaps in your land or in the open, collecting berries, different things like that to cook with. We want that to have a positive influence on your character, and that be part of how you have your build. So if you are playing a warrior, then you may choose, just throwing this out there, like meads that give you stat benefits towards your playstyle, right? For the situation that you want to be in, versus this inevitable hunger that you have to just eat, resources, and it doesn't feel like a positive loop. So went on a tangent there, but a couple more questions. Will you bring back the counter armor types or keep plate being a true tank? Well, luckily going forward with our archetype system where you have classes and multi-class options, the armors are for the classes, right? So fighter will be one of the most varied, but let's say there's a particular armor that only mage gets and particular armor, like let's say plate, that only fighter gets, maybe because of a specialization that you've chosen in fighter that allows you to have plate. You'll be able to choose between those two classes that you have and the options that it gives you in the armors. So in short, yes, plate armor, because it's restricted to a class, it will help define out the playstyle you may want to choose, or you may want a portion of it. You may be able to be a little bit tankier of a battle mage than it is an offensive mage. Yeah, so you said more strict classes. So there are classes and ways that we are able to balance. So we talked about having, fighter and mage and thief and ranger and those, but then specializations underneath those. So then you can multi-class between classes and specializations inside of that. And I don't remember the number last time. We ran a calculation of how many different combination of classes that you could have, and it was a ridiculous number of combinations that you could have between your skills and the specializations. So Mort just slacked me and said it was more than like 43,000 combinations. So yes, is it different than the existing? Absolutely. But we do believe that we can help give players options for their play style without it feeling too restricted. But this is something that we will test with everyone, and that feedback is going to be really important in that. It's always difficult to get the feel of something when it's just talking through a design, but the first play test you'll start to see some of the pre-built classes. So you and we'll talk about this in actually just a minute, but you'll have, and this is part for the test, but you'll be able to choose essentially a specialization, so you can get a set of skills to test. We'll have melee and ranged, and it's really just a way to facilitate the test. But when we actually get the archetype system in place, you will have your own progression to choosing those. Moving along here. So this is maybe a little bit hard to see, but another one of the asks was a better coloring system for armor. The existing Fractal Online coloring had some technical debt that prevented us from having good coloring and dye options. And that was one of the things that we tackled right away. We actually rebuilt the character and equipment system. One of the first things we did, because we wanted to be able to have effects on armor and dye options so that you can craft dyes with regents. If you've ever played the current Fracture Online and you have collected your 3 chests full of regents, I think it's 2 full chests, you'll, at least I always had the a desire to sort them by color, because all the regents had almost their kind of variety of color, and then you have like a colorful, you'd have like red and kind of pinks and blues in one chest, and you'd have more greens, yellows, etc. in another chest. That was how I organized them. But with that, just like dye is made today, or in the past, those will be part of the dye system as well. So certain colors will require certain regents. We really want to expand on the regents' applicability throughout the game design as well. I understand that one. As long as the Earth Blossom is an Earth regent now, we'll see about that. We may, maybe an air regent. We're going through and relooking on all of those. But we do want to keep, for example, the core of all of the regent system. So how you combine those into different oils and things like that. We want to think through what that could be going forward. So those will change. But this slide was to show that you can have a variety of different options. I'm not saying I would choose pretty much anything other than the black set, but many other people have more colorful taste than I do, and we can support that. And I only chose a few different, but we can honestly support a variety, like thousands of colors. But we're boiling those choices back down to a lot of dyes, because many colors you can't really tell from being at a top-down angle either. So we want to have distinguishable colors as a variety that you can choose from. But you can play your purple assassin, so you just be bright purple. One of the other aspects along this journey as we relaunch is that we are bringing along the Kickstarter like rewards, right? We could have left those back in the past during the acquisition, but as a player who's kickstarted more games, in fact, I just kickstarted a board game yesterday. We'll probably see that in 10 years, but a lot of you have already supported, whether it was the other studio with Dynamite Studio, Fracture Online, and inevitably it, got us to the position that we were. So while some have asked, like why spend the time on these, I think it's immensely important that eventually, in some form or fashion, we get the things that we kickstarted back in the day. And so with that, we have slide there a little bit out of order here, but we have begun on pets. So this is only the one of the first 4 pets, and this is a cosmetic pet. So there will be a differentiation between cosmetic pets and what I'd say is like world interactable pets. So things like that would be attack, etc. Those will be 2 classes. But in this case, this is a cosmetic pet, one of the first ones in the Kickstarter that we have begun development on just recently. And we want it to be, the cute little dragon hatchling, depending on which version you choose. If you didn't kickstart it, part of the agreement of like bringing all of these and skins and pets in is that they will be purchasable in the shop as well. But if you had the Kickstarter and you had the tier, then you automatically have these. So we're iterating on that, ensuring that we can get the feeling of the dragon hatchling into the 3D model. But there's a lot of little animations and stuff that we want to nail down too. Should be a cute little dragon hatchling to run around on your adventures. Minimum 10 years. Yeah, that's the way it feels. There's times I've gotten Kickstarter items and I forgot I even kickstarted them. The other thing around Kickstarter, we have concept complete on all of the armors that were in the different tiers. And we already have the concept art for the foundation armor as well. I know if you have been asking about that. And so our approach is that these are skins. We really want, especially if you look at some of these, there's an identity across the skin, a very ornate, or the word is escaping me now, but not very modular pieces. So these will be skins that will be available to override the equipment that you're wearing. Skins and visual effects on abilities that are changeable via like the in-game shop will be disableable in like PvP, so that you can like understand what who you're fighting against and what they are. But these skins, as well as the pets, we are weaving into our development life cycle. So as we get to new armors, there will occasionally be a new one of these skins that we have available. Will be in the cash shop, but will be granted to the Kickstarter reward tiers. A lot of these, the concept art is sick, and quite a few have expressed interest in a few of these. So we are looking forward to seeing how those shape up. Any questions? Oh, we're good. All right, so housing. So this is the early picture of a housing change. And with this, we've talked about the style changing, right? There's a lot of things, the environment, the characters, the weapons, the armor, like the style is changing to support many more years of Fractured Online without it looking dated. And so to do this, we wanted to re-look at buildings and player housing. And Andre, the main designer, and we played a lot of the same games. We're on a lot of the same pages. Split lane, even better than the new shape. It's kind of any shape. So we haven't talked much about this, and we'll have a more focused design session on this, but I wanted to tease a little bit out. We are looking at doing a modular setup where you actually place your foundation, place your pillars, walls, windows, doors around. Right now in the current Fracture Online, you build a prefab, and while you build it, it's kind of piece by piece or layer by layer. When you don't really have options in much customization. With this, we are going hard on customization. And to do that, we needed to, we wanted to update the fidelity of the graphics, but also give a few options. So this is one of the first, let's say, is new player housing and NPC town kits that we're beginning to look at. We now have a system in place. We'll build a UI on top of it later, but where we can change out those pieces. And kind of going forward, you'll see that there's actually a variety of shapes, because with standard kind of survival games or games that support like building nowadays, you have that variety. If it fits inside your claim, you should be able to shape it how you want. And that allows for a lot of decoration options. As I've mentioned in the past, your houses in Fractured Online right now are like mere factories for processing things. Going forward, processing will look different and be elsewhere in the world, and we want the house to be a place that you can decorate, to role play, to have guild halls and houses around that. So we want to support that creativity. And in the top left, you'll see some of our old assets with the new like housing, and so they visually clash. We are going through a lot of assets and cleaning those up as well, but just we wanted to have some, what does a bookshelf look like over here? And I think in one of these, there's something on the wall as well. We want to support decorations on the wall. If you go kill a boss and collect its trophy, you should be able to put it on the wall. So yeah, you should be able to do, we'll probably have a minimum, size, but probably like a 2x2. And depending on your land claim that you grab in the world, you'll be able to build a house probably that size. We haven't put the restrictions in place just yet. As we'll test. That's one of the critical tests, is the building system, letting everyone run through and see what everyone can create. There will be different varieties. If you remember the packs that you bought in Fractured Online, you had a few different kits. We're figuring out what those really will look like going forward. So we don't want them to be out of place. We want them to feel, in the world, in the new world. Figured this would spur a few more questions. And I know there's quite a few in the community that have wanted more decorations. And so, yes, we will be going through a lot of props, giving a lot of different themes. What we'll do is we'll define a theme and then create a series of props and decorations around that. Some will be cashed up, some will be earned in game, some you'll have right off the bat, and we'll tie those into the game. As I mentioned earlier, the world is going through quite a bit of different changes. And to start with, there's really 5 biomes, and we're re-looking at not just the assets we have, but new assets as well. All of the environments are being created fresh and brand new to support this. And I took a few of the words from the page, like long page that Matt has for each of these different biomes. But everything from murky, sprawling wetlands to jagged peaks to lowlands full of like flowering plants. And then the steppes being that first biome, that's a transitional biome, to fill out the world, is like rolling plains with scattered trees. And grabbed some of the new concept art around features that kind of tell that biome identity. So in like the bottom right, you can see even the buildings are a little bit more stone, jagged edges, etc. But we'll be updating more of the concept art as we get through building out these environments. We're rebuilding points of interest, expanding out what are dynamic points of interest, and potentially what dynamic events will be in place as well. So a lot of world changes going forward. It should look and feel like a pretty much a new game. But then you'll recognize systems like gathering and processing and things like that. Yeah, split lane. Critical build test challenge accepted. Great question. And hilariously enough, I actually had new music playing. So Galatorn BR, music plays a big role in these environments, and he plans on improving the sound effects and soundtrack. Well, if I didn't fail, I had one of the new ambience tracks playing, and I don't know if it was on repeat. There we go. It should be back playing. If it's too loud, let me know. But yes, we are working with a composer that is putting together day and night adaptive tracks for each of the biomes. We have actually a new track that I really wanted to put together for a dungeon that really gave that eerie feeling of a dungeon. And so we're calling it like Curse of Abylis. And while we don't have the dungeon ready to show or anything like that, that's going to be a little bit later. We're hoping to start releasing these soundtrack, these different ambiances. So what's playing right now in the background, if it's even audible, I didn't want it to quite be too loud. I'll turn it up just a tad. But what we wanted to do was have an adaptive approach as you're exploring out in the world. So each biome will have its own identity, and like you said, music plays a really good way at conveying that identity. And we wanted to have that varied. So it's not just the same track playing over and over as you're going through the biome. There's different instruments that are coming in at different times. And then combat, depending on how intense the combat is, if it's a boss out in the world versus a bandit, will have a different battle music. So we are working through that and couldn't be more happy with working with this particular composer. And so this is the night track for the biome, like the first pass of it. So yeah, Galatorn, I also enjoy listening to soundtracks in the background. That's probably the majority of my background or music listening is soundtracks or audiobooks. So we do want to provide out the soundtrack as we are investing in that. So a lot of ambience. We are pulling the two main tracks that was from Fracture Online as inspiration, but we are also taking it a different direction, and the fidelity and quality of the track is also different. So we're trying not to lose the core of Fracture Online, and at least in those two tracks, but really expand it out. Now, this is a fantasy world. We want it to feel alive and rich, and we want you to see visual effects of like birds moving around and chirping and in the appropriate biomes. I grew up playing music all my life, so it's something that I spend a lot of time on. It's just getting the feel of something right. But Hellcrack's in chat, he actually turns off the music, and it's very sad. Moving on a little bit, I didn't see any more questions. Yeah, so, as with most of everyone, we are, playing some Dune to get a break mentally sometimes on the weekends. And luckily Hellcrax did leave the music on for that, but that's one out of many of the games that I've played with them. This was a little bit out of place of a slide, but we wanted to start showing in the steps, and I'll actually put a video out on Discord of running around in it. I should have put a video in here, but the steps biome is continuing to be iterated on with the goal of being mostly complete by the end of this month. I had been asked in the past when first showing off the biome, it seemed kind of bare, that there was mostly just varieties of grass and a couple different trees. I can say that is quite changing as the days progress. So by the end of this month, we'll have the regents that will be available in the steppes biome, more variety of trees, grasses, flowers, shrubbery, all of that. We have a big list that our environment artist is working on every day. This one is a little bit heavy. And we also don't have the camera effect where it is trimming out, but I'll throw a few more screenshots in Discord. If you're not part of our Discord, we try to keep everyone up to date inside the community is honestly the best way. We have now transitioned a lot of the socials, still working on a couple of those, and we'll begin pulsing out onto the socials as well. But sneak peeks and screenshots, we like to interact with everyone in the community, and we'll put some screenshots and stuff out there. Some areas will actually be pretty open with very wavy, just tall grass, and some rocks, things like that. But we do want to have a better, richer visual experience in some of these lands. That I think in the past, maybe last week or a couple weeks ago, I don't remember, I put a side by side in one of the videos of the kind of the forests of the existing Fractured Online versus where we're going directionally, and it's just night and day difference in the way that our style is. And then the last, we actually kind of talked about it a lot up front. They go on too many rants, but the test, the number one, which is combat, the goals for this, a lot of this is driven by the community. The first major piece has been asked of the community for years is WASD input. And with that, the combat changes quite a bit. And Gallows Horn, we do have day-night already, and storms in Fractured Online, but going forward, we want it to play a better part. If it's raining, maybe water elementals spawn, if different things like that, not just a visual aesthetic. And then we will be revisiting climate as well. We want it to be more impactful, especially as we look at what farming and gardening looks like going forward in the future. But on the test, so WSD input, been a huge ask from the community for a long time. I know I was one of those people asking too. We're also doing network load tests. So we'll start off small and ramp up. Anytime you're changing networks or trying out new servers, you need to be testing those so you can understand optimizations that need to happen. And then, one of the most important things is the new combat system fun? The last thing we want to do is put a subpar combat system in, as it's one of the most important loops in the game. There's a lot of systems too, so there's a lot of foundational systems that we don't list here that we need to test out. One of those being the equipment system, statuses, things like that. And then, like I mentioned above, one of the most important things, collecting your feedback. So Mort, working in our community, is currently evaluating different ways to collect feedback. There will be times that we're just in the Discord, in the voice channels, and anyone can hop in and toss feedback as we're running around, just fighting everyone in this particular test. We'll be testing with 2 classes, I would say 2 specializations, and a really restricted down skill set as we're building those systems. The pre-built specializations, we're looking at melee and ranged, still not 100% decided on the weapons for that. It will be in the pretty much fully complete steppes biome, be PvP focused, but it will have a party system. So you'll be able to PvP everyone who isn't in your party. So that would be no friendly fire. Yes, split lane. The goal is that we are moving combat towards a little bit more action combat instead of the MOBA click. I think that that's a sweet spot in modern games that hasn't been explored enough. So in an MMO setting, and we're hoping that we can find that sweet spot between action combat and skillful play that creates an engaging PvE and PvP experience. So one of the things I was really excited about is Andre actually put in the telegraph system so that we now have proper visuals on where things are casting and the different ways that skills are. So whether or not it's an ability that arcs or is a cone, like these standard type of telegraph systems. But it's something that really wasn't there in the existing Fractured Online, and it adds a lot to being able to understand what's happening on your screen. So looking forward to seeing these show up. But really, I think we're right at the hour. We had planned, to hop on for about an hour and talk about some of the updates. Going forward, everyone's really firing on all cylinders, from making pets, armor and weapons, buildings, environment. We have a few that are just really working on everything kind of everywhere. planning out POIs and open world type, small, medium, large POIs, or what's kind of considered open world dungeons. So quite a bit of moving parts, and we're hoping to continue every week to keep you guys up to date. Sometimes it's only questions and answers. We are typically every other week doing a developer update, and then every week we try to answer questions. Sometimes we have answered most of the questions in chat, and it's just like a quick Q&A blog post, but we're trying to keep everyone up to date. Galatorn, that is an excellent question. We actually talk about this all the time. One of the last, I was talking with Andre earlier today with water related to this and the complexity around performance. With all of these changes, Galatorn asked, graphics, etc., how more demanding will the game become? What's actually pretty fantastic about this is, I mentioned in an earlier video right at the beginning of the acquisition that we're going to spend some time focusing on like foundational things, upgrading to Unity 6, upgrading to new renderer pipeline that Unity had available, doing all of the work to migrate all the shaders and everything to this, and rebuilding the character system. All of those were with optimizations in mind. I think the common joke about like Fracture Online is like, if you wanted to heat your room up, you would just start it and let your computer just bake. And going forward, we don't see near that resource utilization. We've seen, I'll get the exact numbers from the test that Andre had done on the amount of characters on the screen, but it was an absurd amount of characters with keeping very reasonable FPS. So every time we are rebuilding, we're keeping things optimized as much as possible. So in the current state of Fracture Online relaunch efforts, we are actually more optimized than we were in the live version of Fracture Online. So I haven't tested with all of like the varieties of hardware. You know, they always say if you want a game that you're developing to run on a particular set of hardware, make sure you go and acquire that hardware. And I have a little bit more testing and acquiring of hardware to ensure like what is our minimum that you can play the game at. But I can already say new graphics, new optimizations. We spent probably 2 months on optimizations, setting the foundation going forward to be in a better state than Fracture Online was with better graphics. I also believe that if you are streaming Fracture Online, the streams should be better at showing the detail of the new style. So the old style of Fracture Online had a lot of noise, a lot of like competing colors, and streams often had a difficulty with that. You would see this if you were looking at a game and you had like high definition grass or like trees and you're really up close to it. Streams would have a problem and begin, I don't know if artifact is the right word, but it would become a mess. Going forward, the colors are very soft and smooth, kind of a painterly style, and it should be a lot easier on your streams as well, so your viewers should be able to see what you're doing better. Now in Faction Warfare, where everyone's piling on with all the visual effects, that's kind of going to always be an interesting hodgepodge of visual fun. Split Lane asks, in new Fractured, can we turn the camera around the character? So our goal is yes. Right now we are working on the new controller and the new movement, all of those as it's part of the new combat system. And with that, we are building everything with the ability to like rotate your camera around. So typically in top-down games, you're very locked in your camera. And so when I say top-down games, we're talking like Path of Exile, Diablo, like would be considered like modern isometric style games, which is different than third-person games where the expectation is your character turns around, right? And they do certain geometry changes so that they don't create as much in an asset because you would never see it with your camera. So we decided to make it so that you can rotate your camera. And while it may not be advantageous all the time to do that, it is nice to be able to look around buildings, to look around. It makes the world feel more, 3D. So we are going that direction, and if the feedback that can't turn in camera isn't wanted, then we can always disable that. I don't imagine that to be the case. So we're a little bit over, but any other questions before we kind of wrap up today's stream? So question is from Cancelable TV, nice name. I see the classes in the testing. Will there be defined classes with defined skills instead of a big skill tree like in the old Fractured, or a more defined but with lots of freedom like in Path of Exile? I think it's going to be a bit of a mix. So each, without like pulling up the diagram, I would have to pull it, get it again. And we're going to go into more detail on this before the first combat test. But each class will have a series of class abilities. You'll have racial abilities, as well as weapon abilities or skills. And depending on your specialization, depending on your class, depending on your multi-class, you will be able to change out those skills and abilities for different ones, depending on what you've chosen, like from a class and race and weapon perspective. So if we plan to have 2 weapons that you can swap between. So if I have let's say that I am a fighter and a mage, so I like to be battle mages, then I could use weapons from each of those classes in my archetype. So a fighter will have a variety because they're typically more versatile in a lot of martial weapons, and then I can use staffs or mage weapons as well. So then I would have a variety of those abilities to choose from. So if I swap between a staff to a bow, let's say for the fighter, then it would immediately change out and pick up the abilities for that weapon. And there should be a few that you choose from. We do plan on different types of, let's say, staves or long bows or short bows, etc., to have different moves with those. So it's not so much that it is a bow, but it's what type of bow dictates what abilities it has. So we're hoping that between all of these different combinations that you still have that flexibility. So while you are choosing a class, a fighter can play differently than another fighter, especially if you start mixing other classes. So when we'll get a little bit more detailed and have some diagrams out. But to answer your question, it's hard to say, like Path of Exile, it's going to kind of feel like a few different games, kind of part Dungeons and Dragons, part action combat, and part MMO. So we're close to wrapping up. Any final questions? And if you have questions after the stream, toss them in Discord or email us. We'll get a response back on those, and it will be part of the Q&A going forward too. So Cancelable, I did enjoy Throne and Liberty as well. Got to the end game and was just busy developing, but it was quite a few good things in Throne and Liberty, especially the giant flying whale. That was very interesting. The other thing I do want to say on classes too is that this gives us the option to be very thematic on classes. I think the current plan is it's a little tease out there is to have more thematic resource bars for the classes and how the weapons for those classes work together. We think that there's going to be fighter is going to have an interesting different way to play, especially if you combine those. But yeah, we'll be sharing more of those details in the next probably within the month. All right, everyone, we are gonna go ahead and wrap it up. Like I said, join us on Discord, hop into the community, ask questions. There's quite a few channels. We keep up with the different multilingual channels and translate. Speaking of which, we are actually going through an effort right now in the community to figure out what the future of our multi-language community is going to be. So we're looking at different bots right now to facilitate translating so that everyone can play a part in a conversation instead of being siloed off into their own language. And then that also begs the question of, in the future, we have new plans for chatting in the chat system for Fracture Online. So we're spending an amount of time focused on making sure that the community can interact and chat with each other, even if it's in different languages. I played a lot of Final Fantasy XIV, and I really enjoyed like the translation system and things like that in there. And, this game is an MMO, and it's a very social MMO, and we want to facilitate that with the technology nowadays. So, appreciate everyone joining us for the live stream and the developer update. Hop in the Discord. Happy to answer questions.